So here, this is a part 2 about the video before. So if you're watching this, watch the video before. And the video is calm the waves in your mind. Then your mind will reflect your surrounding just like a mirror. So last video, all I did was literally talk about water, waves, how storms happen. I just went on random tangents, but it was very much kind of like building the environmental system, or at the very least, the way I see the environment, the way I see the world interacting with everything around it. But I was trying to explain, or at the very least, kind of like identify that kind of like that us as children kind of like developing and looking at the world and using the world as reference in order for us to kind of like dictate how things work, how things operate, and all these kinds of things. So the mental approach that I was like moving towards was a lot more of like the same way you cannot go to the fucking ocean and calm the same way the world doesn't calm the waves, because the waves were caused by the storm. So like it doesn't calm the waves. It wants a calm ocean, or it wants calm waters. So what it does is it calms the storm. And the best way to calm a storm is to give it energy for it to burn itself out, or to kind of like to just let it out. And I kind of like returned to a conversation, to two things. I returned to our own selves, because like what we do when a thought comes in, the first thing that human beings, or at the very least in our nature, is kind of like, I do not want to think about that. And by not thinking about that, you kind of ignore it. And what happens is it kind of like, it just keeps bouncing back and forth, and its energy is not going anywhere. But in fact, what it starts doing is it starts occupying more space in your head. So you're applying more energy to avoid it. And in order to apply more energy to avoid it, what happens is, again, like it's one of those, like, I don't know, I used the term, I kind of like explained a situation I had with my friend and her son, and it wasn't a situation where I was just like hanging out. But what happened was, like, in an attempt to understand the kid, I tried to kind of like, give attention, like your feelings are valid, right? Like, whatever thought exists in your head, it's a valid thought. It has nothing to do with you. There's no point associating it with what you are, who you are, and why you are thinking about it at all. You can figure that out, but look, it's just a random thought. It could be triggered by a movie you watched, the video you watched, the reel you watched, the conversation you had, some person doing something you liked or didn't like, right? All of these things kind of like, trigger these things in your head, because your mind kind of like responds. Just a couple of videos ago, I wrote about how the ego is kind of like your best friend that supports you in everything, and the mind is basically where the ego kind of like is constructed. So the mind is always looking at you and going like this, what else do you want, right? And like these beautiful things. But anyways, that actual like conversation I'm going to, because like as I was saying, I was talking about, like, you don't really like calm the waves, or in order to calm the waves, what you have to do is kind of like, handle the storm. And how do you handle the storm? You just don't. It's a fucking storm. It's a lot of energy that's going in different places. But how did it become a storm? And that's, I think, when I kind of like remembered something I wrote once. And I would love to, I would love to go back and re-edit it. The idea is, cloudy days are unfair to the sun. And in my head, it's kind of like, let me explain that article that I wrote, or it's not really an article, it's just more me kind of like, I remember I was at the beach and I was enjoying a beautiful day, and it was just a beautiful day, but it was cloudy. There was a whole lot of wind, and the ocean was all over the place, but it was such a beautiful day. It was not raining, it was just kind of like that. those days where you're like, nah, like you enjoy it because it's not really like you don't necessarily have to stay inside because it's raining, but you also cannot kind of like swim, and there's no point for you to go places because it might rain at any time. There's kind of like that relationship, so you're just there enjoying it. And it came to me like cloudy days are not fair to the sun, and the whole discussion about like how the sun is the reason why clouds kind of like start forming. It's because the sun shines so bright and the day is kind of like so kind of colorful to a point where water kind of like just releases itself from the earth, and as it releases itself it goes up, and as it goes up it kind of like kind of combines with itself, because like it's a bit colder over there, it's not as beautifully warm underground, and like with that pressure it kind of like turns into clouds, and then they kind of get agitated because they start bumping with each other. They're not living in harmony on the surface of the earth. They actually like water, it's just, it finds itself, it finds other droplets of water. But as steam, they're kind of like those electrical charges, or the fact that they're kind of like within the atmosphere, like bouncing across each other, they kind of get more and more agitated. And some bundles are like a bit more maybe arrogant, or some bundles are a bit more opinionated, or some bundles are a bit more kind of like selfish, self-serving, like right. Like clouds kind of like grow, but how do they grow? Like bigger clouds consume the smaller ones, or smaller ones are kind of fighting with the bigger ones. So then the electricity starts coming around, and that's basically the whole gist of the article. It's just kind of like how clouds form, and then kind of like because the sun is doing such a beautiful job, and it's kind of like revealing itself to the world, but the world can't really handle it. Why? Because like if you put a tree under the sun without kind of like the night, or without rain, or without water, then it withers and dies. It can't handle that beauty, it can't handle that blessing, that kind of like divine shit. And so kind of like that, in a weird way, like I was reflecting on that while I was having the conversation about like calming the waves in my mind. But you can't calm the waves in your mind the same way you can't calm the ocean. The best you could do is kind of like pay attention to the storm and see how and give it a chance to kind of like move on. And the same you do with whatever's happening in your mind. Because like when the waves of your mind are kind of all over the place, like something is happening for them to be moving. It's not like they are moving. It's like, it's like when people say calm down, the first thing that happens is like that's you get fucking more upset, simply because like you're literally just, it's when somebody tells you to calm down, they're projecting energy, and the energy goes into the whole mess that is having that happen. So what ends up being the case is basically like acknowledging, again, it's giving attention to the storm. It's like, what's going on? Oh, you're pissed at this. Okay, get pissed. How many tangents do you want to go on? 5, 10, 20, 100? How many lightning bolts do you think it takes for the storm to be withered, right? How many days of rain? It doesn't fucking matter. Let it happen. And as it happens, it's just kind of like, because the storm builds on a whole lot of different energies that have been kind of like stored. So that's why people feel good when they vent out their anger. They let a whole lot of things kind of like, that have not been noticed before, to kind of like find their way out of them. And then suddenly they're like empty. They're kind of like, their energy levels are kind of like, not necessarily depleted, but no longer constrained, right? Like, and it's just like, I'm feeling lax. I didn't lose energy, I'm feeling lax, I'm feeling relaxed, the tension is gone. And tension basically is pent up energy. It's kind of like, controlled energy, which is kind of like, I think tension is misused energy. So calm the waves of your mind is not an action on its own, it's the result of an action. Then your mind will reflect your surroundings just like a mirror. And just like basically like a beautiful day when the sea is calm, or the lake is calm, or whatever. The reason it's calm, it's not because its calmness was the effect of everything else being cool and chill. Right? That's basically it. Its calmness is the result of everything else being cool and chill. When the lake is calm, you enjoy the lake. But you're looking everywhere, right? When the sea is calm, you're just looking everywhere. You're not just looking at the sea, you're looking at the horizon. But if the sea is all over the place, you're kind of noticing every wave that comes up and down. You're kind of like in that zone. It's fascinating because as well, like, the same thing. When your mind is all over the place, you're noticing the distress. But when your mind is cool, you're noticing everything else. And that's the reflection I'm talking about. Because on a beautiful day, you're looking at the sea and you're just looking into the horizon, and looking at the birds and looking at the boats. When the sea is in distress, is not kind of like chilled, it's not calm, it's not relaxed. You're literally seeing the waves crash. Like you start noticing those things, so you're more focused on what's going on, because that's where everything is. Instead of focusing on the storm itself that's making the sea, right? Like instead of focusing on the things that are contributing to it, or are we able to focus? I'm not sure. Now, it's an interesting way to kind of like look at something and find out, because when it comes to like the waves of our mind, you just have to let the storm play itself out, and if you don't give it attention, it will reoccur over and over again. But if you give it attention, then ultimately you understand where it came from, and then next time a different storm would brew for a different reason, at least not the same. Cool beans? I love you guys.